And guess what happened? $50 million the U.S. government gave to St. Paul, Minnesota, and to Denver, Colorado, to buy the best Ninja Turtle outfits ever seen in the history of the world. Did you all see them on TV? Oh, I mean, these guys were padded up like you would not believe. They could barely walk. I mean, they were just... They could run, though. They could run after you. We had a group of 200 of them that took on 9 women and 2 guys. 200 of them. And we faced them off. We were coming off a bridge. We'd been hanging a banner, several banners down from one of the bridges, down so that the 300 kids who were doing nothing more than trying to go across the river to go to a concert with Rage Against the Machine was playing. And they wanted to go over and to go to that free concert, and somehow they got down on an area where the police said, you can't go and we're not letting you go. And they started tear gassing them, and 300 of them got arrested for doing nothing. And when we heard what had happened, we went racing up to this bridge that overlooked the place where these kids were and started hanging banners. And after the sun set, and finally all the kids had been put into these buses and hauled over to the county jail, then we folded up the banners and started walking back across the bridge and got to an intersection that just happened to be right in front of the Texas Republican delegation and the City Hall. And the police had blocked off all of the corners of that intersection. The bridge had been closed. We were on a closed bridge when we dropped the banners off of it. When we walked back up, here's this beautiful intersection, perfectly made for a few more banners to go out into it. So here were 9 women, 2 guys, and off we went with the banners right in the middle of the road. And Code Pink Women for Peace right there. Hula hooping for peace. And you can see this on YouTube. It's quite a thing. One young woman that was just hula hooping for peace. As first from this side, here came 60 guys, 60 Ninja Turtles, plunking up right there. They stopped. Then on the other side, 60 more. We were surrounded here. And then the escape route was closed off by 60 more of them coming across there with horses behind. And then all of a sudden, how many of you all have seen the movie called The Battle of Seattle? It just came out last week. I saw it last night. You got to go see it, about what happened in Seattle in 1999. And to hear the thud of the steps, and then all of a sudden the batons coming out, click, click, click. And here we were in this intersection going, what are you guys doing? I mean, it's a closed intersection, for God's sake. Cars can't come through here because you, the police, have closed it off. So why can't we be right out here? Clunk, clunk, get back, get back. And all of a sudden, here out comes the baton like that. Push, push, push. And we'd seen what happened in Denver when one of the Code Pink women, and you can see this one on the YouTube because it will be in court, where this young woman named Alicia, who was videotaping the police arresting this fella, and all of a sudden a police comes up to her and just goes wham, wham, and then she just turns teacup over kettle or whatever that saying is. I mean, she just did a backflip. I mean, she was hurt from what he did, and it's on tape. I mean, gratuitous violence for peaceful, nonviolent people. And so here they were coming toward us in St. Paul, Minnesota. Clunk, clunk, clunk. Get back on the sidewalk. Why? It's a free intersection. It's closed. Get back. We don't care. Get back. Get back. And so step by step, 9 women, 2 guys, facing them off just like that. 1 step back. 1 step back. Finally, we got onto the sidewalk. We said, where else are we supposed to go? Keep going. We said, this is our sidewalk. This is a free sidewalk. St. Paul, Minnesota. 200 guys pushing, pushing. Well, there were the signs that were right behind us that said road closed, so we thought, yeah, this will be a good picture. So we just went right behind the road closed sign, stuck our heads out between the little things and put the banners over them, and just kind of went, now what are you going to do? Well, there were hundreds of people that were gathered on the sides just to see what was happening. What were these cops doing? Pushing around 9 women and 2 guys that were doing nothing but hula hooping for peace, singing for peace, and yet were being pushed, pushed, pushed. Later on that week, there were 4 separate incidents where hundreds of young men and women were tear gassed. Tear gassed. There was some violence. There were some guys that threw rocks into some windows, and those guys should have been arrested. And it always makes you wonder, you know, $50 million, they've been tracking these groups for over a year and a half. They had infiltrated what was called the St. Paul Welcoming Committee. They found out the second day of the convention who the 3 infiltrators were, because they had to testify at court to hold some of these people. $50 million, a fusion center of all federal agencies, and they couldn't figure out who was going to cause the trouble. So when you can't figure that out, you just arrest them all. And that's what's starting to happen. You just arrest them all. And that's really what happened in Seattle. They arrested them all. The militarization of what's going on in our society, of the law enforcement functions, where you can see almost a direct correlation of what goes on in Baghdad. In fact, we started calling St. Paul Baghdad on the Mississippi, because you start seeing that law enforcement's breaking into houses, going after these groups. Same problem they seem to have is the military. They don't have the right intelligence. If they're actually going after people that are breaking windows, that are going to break the windows, well, that's one thing. You know, that's criminal actions. But for all these other people that say, oh, we want to close it down, I mean, that's still free speech. Closing it down is still free speech. And yet that's what they're using to charge these young men and women with conspiracy, because 2 of them said, let's close it down. And in fact, they traveled across the country to groups like this to say, do you want to come to the Republican National Convention? Do you want to help us close it down? And how many of you all would have said, yeah, I want to go? Well, I would have. My hand would have been up. I'm a part of the conspiracy. And these kids are being charged. And they may go to jail on it. It's really frightening what's going on right now. The use of the same types of equipment. I mean, military equipment is being used. The National Guard was called out. Snipers on the rooftops. I mean, it is one thing if you look at it, do an analysis, a threat analysis. But I think what we're seeing now, $50 million, you got to justify it. If you can get $50 million out of the feds, you got to come up with a threat. And that's what we're seeing. It's something to be careful of here. If Charlottesville ever hosts any sort of a meeting, watch out for this money, this free money that comes from the feds. And with that comes some directions that your local law enforcement people will have to follow. And in fact, as we protested at the St. Paul's mayor's home 2 nights in a row at midnight, after these occurrences happened, finally, the next day I was speaking at a peace conference in St. Paul, and after I'd given my presentation, and I told them my presentation was not about my book or anything like that. It was what had happened in St. Paul the day before, and having come from the mayor's office, and then telling the group about having been to the mayor's home 2 previous nights. Well, this man came up to me afterwards and he said, "You should not go to the mayor's home. The mayor's family is scared when you come there at midnight." I said, "Well, I'm scared when I'm on your streets during the day as well as the night, and the mayor needs to know about that." "Well, the mayor's family's scared." And I said, "Well, how would you know that?" "Well, my daughter's married to him." And I said, "Well, I would suggest that please take this message back to your daughter and to your son-in-law, that we are going to continue to visit at midnight when we find that people, nonviolent protesters of administration policies, are getting roughed up, getting tear gassed in your city. He's elected and he's going to have to take the heat for this." He is taking a bit of heat, but not a lot, because guess what the Republicans did for the city of St. Paul? They bought them an insurance policy. An insurance policy so that any arbitrary arrests and the city getting sued for these arbitrary arrests are not going to be paid out. Lawsuits won't be paid out by the city of St. Paul. It won't come to the police department. It's covered by insurance. So that's another way to give free license to the police to be as aggressive as they want to be, because nobody in St. Paul is going to have to pay for it, except by their reputation. Their reputation. Well, it's really what we want to be in life, isn't it? What we want our country to be, whether we want to be these warmongers that the rest of the world really thinks we are. And when you look at our history, we are pretty much what they think. Are we going to change things around? What are we going to do? Are we going to put pressure on Obama to say he wants 95,000 more U.S. military? He wants Army and Marines. Buck them up by almost 100,000 more. What's he going to do with them? He says we're going to remove one combat brigade per month till we get all 15 brigades out, but he doesn't say when. He doesn't talk about how many of those Blackwater private security people are going to be staying in Iraq and guarding the biggest embassy in the whole world. He doesn't talk about that. So these are things that we need to put pressure on him, because if he is elected president, then we want to make sure that he knows what the will of the people is, to close down that military force, to bring our troops home, to try to get a foreign policy going that will instill confidence in America, confidence that's been sorely eroded over the last 7.5 years. Eroded for our reputation internationally, and then domestically. What do we think about ourselves? I don't think we're real proud of ourselves. And if you think about what both Pat and Sandy were talking about, and David just a minute ago, we've already spent over $500 billion on the war in Iraq, and now there's something else. So how about $700 billion for this bailout, the bailout of the billionaires, the welfare for the wealthy? You break the rules, you blow the money, you go running to your friends in the government and say, help, help, bail us out again. I mean, there's a history of this, and a lot of it revolves around George Bush. You remember 20 years ago, almost to the year, that was the savings and loan scandals, and you remember Silverado. Remember Silverado? You know, the savings and loan company that Neil Bush, brother to George Bush, was involved in. Yeah, it turned turtle. It certainly did. John Keating, Lincoln Savings and Loan. 5 senators involved in protecting John Keating, and one of them a presidential contender, John McCain, who was cited by the Ethics Committee of the Senate for having been involved in protecting Keating and the Lincoln Savings and Loan disaster.